Chapter 55. And the sun stood still. Joshua and the elders had just received men who claimed to be ambassadors from a faraway land. They said they came to seek peace. If so, reasoned the elders, then there would be no particular harm in promising not to attack a nation that wasn't included among the enemy nations of Canaan. Although these men looked like Canaanites, Joshua knew that some similar tribes had gone to other lands, especially North Africa, to live. The elders of Israel were told of these things, and it was decided that it would be well to do what the strangers asked of them, and promise not to harm their nation. This was carried out in a solemn ceremony with Joshua, the strangers, the priests, and elders present. However, though there was an element of doubt in this matter, God was not consulted. Joshua chapter 9 verses 3 through 15. God's warning against making peace with Canaanites was temporarily neglected, and the leaders of Israel paid more attention to these strangers than to God. New clothes and provisions were supplied to the strange ambassadors. After they were given food and overnight lodging within the camps of Israel, they thankfully and smilingly set off to the north to their mysterious nation. Send several armed scouts to follow them without being seen, Joshua ordered. I am curious to know just where they came from. It wasn't expected that the scouts would return any time soon, and it was a surprise when they returned early only 3 days later. It wasn't necessary to be gone any longer, the scouts reported. The men we followed went north for a few miles and then turned west, and went directly to the Hivite city of Gibeon, about 20 miles to the west. If that is their home, then Israel has promised to spare a city or nation well within our promised land. We have been tricked, Joshua muttered. Get 50,000 troops on the move now, and we'll go straighten this matter out. Treachery discovered. Having been informed that the strange men claiming to have come from faraway nations had instead gone to a city only about 20 miles from the camps of Israel, Joshua was quite perturbed. These men had exacted a promise from Joshua that Israel would not attack their country. Now it was quite evident that their country was an area well within the bounds of Canaan, and God had instructed Israel to destroy all the nations, cities, and people within those bounds. Obviously, these men had tricked Israel into a sacred promise to spare their people, which was directly against God's will. The many thousands of Israel's soldiers quickly assembled at Joshua's command, led by the scouts who had followed the men responsible for tricking Israel into a peace pact. Joshua and his soldiers spent 3 days in traveling to their destination. It was the walled city of Gibeon, the capital of a district of swarthy people called the Hivites. 4 Hivite cities, including Gibeon, had joined in this strategy in seeking peace with Israel. Joshua chapter 9 verses 16 and 17. The Israelite soldiers moved boldly within the shadows of the walls of Gibeon, but there was no sign of any soldiers on the walls to protect the city. Send men to the gate with this message, Joshua told his officers. Have our men tell them that these men who came to see us in Gilgal must be sent out to speak with us right away. A group of soldiers went to the nearest gate and loudly repeated Joshua's request. There was a slow response only a few minutes later. The gate swung open, and out walked the men who had come to Gilgal posing as strangers from a faraway nation. A few Hivites of high rank accompanied them. Behind them was a crowd of Hivites, silently watching to see what would happen. The ambassadors sheepishly walked up to Joshua and his men. Why did you go to all the trouble of trying to fool us into believing that your native land was quite far away, instead of well within our land only a few miles from our camp? Joshua asked the ambassadors. The Hivites Excuse. We have heard about how you have wiped out your enemies, a Gibeonite officer explained. We did not want to be counted among them. The city of Gibeon here, and 3 other Hivite cities to the south, Shephirah, Beeroth, and Kirjath-Jearim, formed a secret alliance to seek a promise from Israel's leaders that you would not attack us. We heard that you are a fair and an honest people, and would keep any vow you might make. We became aware that your God commanded you to destroy all the people of this region, and we were so alarmed that we tried to carry out the only plan that we thought would save us. But we aren't begging for freedom now. You have us in your power to deal with as you wish." Joshua was in no hurry to make any decision, yet he knew if he wiped out their cities, he would be breaking the pledge that the leaders of Israel had made before God as a witness. There was no other choice. Israel had made a binding agreement and would have to pay the price of letting those Hivite cities remain in their land. Joshua dismissed the Gibeonites, set up camp near Gibeon, and held a conference with the princes of Israel. When the main body of Israel heard the decision of the elders and Joshua, many of them were very disappointed. Some were even angered and sent spokesmen to the elders to voice their feelings. Joshua chapter 9, verse 18. "It is not right to allow these pagan Hivites any mercy," shouted one of the spokesmen. "God will punish us if we fail to attack those 4 Hivite cities at once." Another yelled heatedly, "Why are our leaders defying the Creator in this matter?" There was much murmuring among the assembled thousands after these remarks, which were not necessarily made because the speakers desired obedience, but so much wealth had already been taken from the enemies of this land that a part of the hosts of Israel had become very greedy. And those were the ones whose ire was roused because of being deprived of the loot from the Hivite cities. Hivites made perpetual laborers. Ignoring the loud protests, the elders told the people that Israel should stick to the agreement and not attack the Hivites, but that Israel should make the inhabitants of the 4 cities bond servants of Israel to serve in the physical needs of the Levites. This would keep them in very close contact with God so that they would never return to idolatry. When the troops who had accompanied him heard what Joshua was about to do, some of them even muttered in disappointment at being deprived of the exceedingly profitable opportunity of plundering the Hivite cities. Joshua called the rulers and chief officers of the Hivites before him and made this proclamation. "Though you have sought peace and have recognized our God as great, you tricked us, and therefore you are cursed. No longer shall your mighty men of war bear arms. Instead, they shall become wood choppers and water bearers for our people. When our people take over this area, your people shall join us and work as our servants. Your tasks will be especially for those in service for our God wherever he will have us build his altar. You will have no choice but to accept these conditions." "These are bitter terms for our warriors and the people of all 4 cities," the leader of Gibeon spoke out. "However, we feel it is better than being destroyed because of our sins. We know your forces are greater, and your God is greater, and too powerful for us to face. And so we must humbly bow to your will." The Hivites should have considered themselves quite fortunate to remain alive given the circumstances, but it is generally human nature to hope for more than is received, and there was a tone of bitterness in the voice of the Gibeonite leader. Having ended these matters with the Hivites for the time being, Joshua and his many men headed back toward Gilgal. They little guessed that they would soon be racing back towards this very city, and now we'll see why. For many centuries there had been a city in the land of Canaan known as Salem. During the days of Abraham, a king was there whose name was Melchizedek, who visited Abraham and blessed him after he rescued Lot and other captives from a group of marauding kings. Genesis chapter 14, verses 17 through 20. Melchizedek, who was later to become Jesus Christ in human form, ruled from Salem as long as the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, lived in Canaan. Later he ceased to rule from there when the children of Israel were in Egypt. In the days of David, Melchizedek again chose Jerusalem, another name for Salem, as the city from which to rule his people. The name Melchizedek means king of righteousness. Hebrews chapter 7 verses 1 through 3. At the time now when the Israelites have just entered Canaan, the ruler of Salem, then called Jerusalem, was a Canaanite, Adoni-Zedek, a sinful king who pretended to be the Lord of righteousness, a king who put himself in the place of the true King of righteousness, Jesus Christ, or Melchizedek. A plot against the Hivites. News of the fall of Jericho and Ai brought fear to the ruler of Jerusalem, especially when he learned of the pact between Israel and the 4 Hivite cities just a few miles from him. Because Gibeon was one of the stronger cities of the area, even stronger than Ai, Joshua chapter 10 verses 1 and 2, Adoni-Zedek realized that the other cities of Canaan must immediately band together to stand against the Israelites or be defeated once and for all. The proud king of Jerusalem sent messengers to the rulers of 4 neighboring Amorite cities. These cities were Hebron, where the Israelite scouts went on their return trip through Canaan about 40 years before, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, and were located in an area only a few miles southwest of Jerusalem. Adoni-Zedek suggested that they all join forces and take over the Hivite cities, to punish them for making peace with the invading Israelites. When the kings of these cities received Adoni-Zedek's plea for their armies to join his in an attack on Gibeon, they agreed to send all of their soldiers to the north. Their forces were united on the way to Jerusalem, where Adoni-Zedek's troops were added to them. Together, these thousands of well-trained warriors marched onward to a spot just south of Gibeon, where they camped and readied their equipment for an attack on the city. When the Gibeonites saw these combined armies streaming up from the south, they sent swift messengers to race to Gilgal to ask for help from Israel. While the messengers sped toward the Israelite camp, the armies from the south set up powerful catapults and rams for which to assault the city, and prepared long ladders and ropes for scaling the walls of Gibeon. Night was not far away, however, and the Gibeonites felt certain that no attack would be made until the next day. The messengers from Gibeon arrived at Gilgal before nightfall and were given an immediate audience with Joshua. Thousands upon thousands of Canaanite troops of the Amorite tribes to the south were approaching Gibeon when we left, they excitedly told Joshua. Perhaps by now they have already attacked our city. As your servants, we beg you, send up at least a part of your great army and save us. Joshua chapter 10 verses 5 and 6. Joshua had learned his lesson. Joshua was not inclined to give the messengers any quick response. He wondered if the presence of so many fighting men could mean that Israel might run into deep trouble as punishment for not consulting God in the first place of making the agreement with the Gibeonites, or if God had forgiven him and the elders when they repented. Not wishing another unpleasant situation, Joshua this time went into the tabernacle and prayed to God to give him a clear picture of what should be done. "Don't be concerned about that army preparing to attack Gibeon," came God's answer. "Not one man of those many thousands will come out alive after I punish them." Now Joshua knew that God had forgiven him and the elders of Israel. Joshua was encouraged, and he was convinced that he should go at once to the aid of the Gibeonites. He gave orders to his officers to assemble the army of Israel for immediate departure. By nightfall, the troops were assembled and ready to march. Gibeon was about 20 miles west of Gilgal, and though they had a rough uphill road between the two places, the Israelite army picked its way through the hill country through the night, and arrived within sight of Gibeon at dawn. Coming over a rise at the head of Israel's troops, Joshua and his officers saw that the Canaanite troops from the south were just starting to move closer to Gibeon for their assault upon the walls. Catapults were being pushed forward. Scores of men were carrying metal-nosed logs by which to batter down the gates, and thousands of archers, swordsmen, and spear-bearers were marching within striking range of the walls. "Draw up our troops to attack the invaders of Gibeon at once," Joshua told his officers. "Keep the troops out of sight behind this rise. Then move north of Gibeon so that we cannot be seen, and then divide up and swing around the east and west walls to surprise the attackers." Minutes later, hordes of Israelite soldiers raced around the walls of Gibeon to rush in among the troops moving against the Hivite city. The attackers were so surprised by the sudden onslaught of the Israelites that they were halted in their tracks, then turned and fled in the opposite direction. The Israelites pressed in against them. So great was the fighting that bodies were strewn for miles along paths that led north, west, south, and southwest from Gibeon. All this did not happen in just a short while. Many of the enemy soldiers tried to hide in ravines and among the rocks, and time was required in searching them out. The Israelites had orders to let no enemy soldiers escape, regardless of how far they had to be chased down. In fact, the main party of the enemy troops to escape the first attack had to be pursued as much as 30 miles to the southwest. Joshua chapter 10, verses 10 and 11. Part of the way was through a long, deep ravine, and there was a steep ridge to climb over, and next a rocky, rugged road so precipitous in places that it was mostly steps cut straight out of the rock. By the time the enemy had been pursued even part of that distance, the morning was halfway spent. Joshua became concerned about being successful in destroying all the enemy troops before dark, after which any who were left would surely succeed in escaping. Already exceptionally heavy clouds were rolling over the sky, which meant that darkness could come on even sooner than usual. A mighty miracle! Please, Lord, cause the sun and moon to stand still so that the day here will be made long enough for us to overcome all of our enemies. Joshua prayed fervently to God. The battle continued. It was no small matter to flush out enemy troops from their hiding places as the area of fighting moved steadily southward. Meanwhile, the sky became darker, and it appeared that an unusually strong storm was likely to break in the region just south of Gibeon. Between thick rolling clouds, the sun shone through at certain times. There was nothing unusual about that. But 2 or 3 hours after Joshua's unusual prayer to God, the Israelites began to be aware that the sun was still in its original position. As the afternoon wore on while Israel kept up its bloody pursuit, it was noted with increasing awe that the sun still had not moved. In fact, it stayed in the midst of the sky for so long that daylight was extended by about 12 hours. Did God actually stop the earth from rotating for 12 hours? This is a mystery we don't know. With God, all things are possible. If this planet in a few minutes ceased turning, God must have performed a miracle much like the braking of a modern jet airplane upon landing. Remember, the Earth's surface is turning at a speed of about 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, and more slowly as one approaches the poles. There was never another day like this one. Many false religious leaders argue that time was lost back at the battle near Gibeon, and as a result, the Sabbath would have been moved from Saturday to Sunday. Not so. That day did not become another day. It was just an extra long day of 36 hours. The lengthened day was a reason for wonderment and fear among both the Israelites and the Canaanites. Even Joshua was awed by what happened. God honored an outstanding prayer in an outstanding way because he was fighting Israel's battles. Even so, Joshua was concerned about conquering all of the enemy troops, many thousands of whom were still well ahead of the Israelite forces. It appeared that they would escape while Israel was being delayed in sending out small groups at a time in every direction to overtake hiding enemy soldiers who fled to the hills. Then came another miracle from God. The sky grew increasingly darker, and lightning flashed above the Canaanite soldiers. Ear-splitting thunder reverberated between the mountains and through the deep ravines. From the black clouds came a strange hissing sound. The fleeing Canaanites looked up in inquisitive terror, and it was then that the power of God descended from the sky upon them with deadly force. Few escape. The hissing sound from the sky was a short warning to the Canaanites as to what was about to happen. Suddenly there was stinging pain from sharp blows upon their heads and their shoulders. Many were killed outright by falling objects. Others were beaten to the ground to quickly die as their prone bodies were trampled and exposed to more blows. Some were able to reach shelter of protruding rock ledges, and from there witnessed that they had been caught in a terrible shower of giant hailstones. Within a few minutes, almost all of the Canaanite soldiers and their animals were battered to death. Then the tremendous shower of heavy hailstones miraculously stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Some of those who had been spared managed to escape and take refuge in nearby cities, but most of them perished from their wounds or were caught and slain by the Israelite soldiers. Joshua chapter 10 verses 8 through 11. Shortly before this event produced by God, the 5 kings of the 5 Canaanite cities fled southward near Makkedah with their troops and held a hasty conference. "There's no hope of holding out against the Israelites," the king of Jerusalem remarked fearfully. "Our men have no more desire to fight, and they're frightened because it's still the daylight, whereas the sun should have gone down hours ago. Israel's God has something to do with this awesome thing. I propose that the 5 of us hide in one of these caves in this area. Let Israel pursue our men. Then perhaps we can return later to safety." The other 4 leaders quickly agreed. They gave orders to their officers to proceed without them. Taking few provisions, they hurried away from the body of their men and sought an insignificant cave some distance up the side of a ravine through which they had been moving. They had been in hiding only a short while when the storm of giant hailstones struck. They realized that the remaining troops would hardly survive such an onslaught from the sky, but they were more concerned about themselves than their people. What they did not realize was that God had no intention of allowing them to escape. When the pursuing Israelites arrived to find dead Canaanites scattered through the ravine, a search was made for possible survivors in the rocks and caves. One soldier was as startled as the 5 kings when he walked into the cave where they were hiding. He ran to notify Joshua at once, who gave orders to deal with them immediately. Trapped! A short while later, as the occupants of the cave peered out at the main body of Israelite soldiers moving on to the south, they were suddenly surprised by large stones rumbling down from above and thudding in a growing heap on the ledge of the mouth of the cave. Almost before they realized that many men must be rolling the rocks from above them, they found themselves trapped by a solid bank of stones much too great to be removed from the inside. Meanwhile, at Joshua's command, the Israelites moved southward to seek out and slay most of the enemy troops not killed by the storm. They pursued them as far south as the city of Makkedah, where they temporarily set up camp. Then Joshua sent men to the cave where the 5 kings were trapped. The men removed the stones piled there and seized the kings as prisoners, and took them to a spot part way between the cave and the city of Makkedah. There were a number of trees there, and the 5 of them were chosen for grisly purpose. The 5 kings were slain, and their bodies hung on trees until sundown. Then they were cut down and taken back into the cave where they had tried to conceal themselves. For the second time, great stones were piled against the mouth of the cave. This time they formed an infamous burial crypt for the 5 men who tried to lead their armies against God. While the 5 kings were still hanging on the 5 trees, Joshua and his troops rushed into Makkedah and slew all the people and disposed of the king of that city in the same manner according to the ruler of Jericho. In the days that followed, Joshua and his troops stormed over the southern region of Canaan to attack and overthrow a number of cities. The idol-worshipping inhabitants were slain, and the leaders killed and hung, all according to God's instructions. God wanted idolatry and child sacrifice completely eliminated from Israel's land. Included in these cities was Hebron, the place Israelite scouts had passed through 4 decades ago. The campaign that had started out as a move to defend the Gibeonites turned into a tremendous victory for Israel. Successful because of God's help, the soldiers returned to Gilgal with great wealth of the spoils of war, household goods, tools, implements, livestock, and farm produce. Joshua chapter 10 verses 29 through 43, Joshua chapter 11 verses 14 and 16. The defeat of the armies of these pagan cities did not mean that all of the southern part of Canaan was conquered. There were still more cities and tribes to take over in that region. Even after many more military operations by Israel's army during the next year or two, there were still a few fortresses and armed areas that Israel had to subdue.